Hello and welcome to Lesson 6, which focuses on threats to Elizabeth from abroad. You will need this Lesson 6 notes template, which is on page 24 of your booklet, and you will see that the first thing you are going to do is you're going to list all the problems at home that Elizabeth faced, and then you're going to try and rank them in order of how much of a threat they were. So you can have the one that was the greatest threat at the top, the one that you think was the least greatest threat at the bottom. Try and do it from memory. This is a smart task, so try and do it to test your memory. If you get stuck, you can look back at lessons 1, 2, 3 and 4 and a little bit in 5 to help you, but try and get a good list of all the problems that you faced that were domestic problems, so problems at home inside England, not external threats from abroad, because that's what we're going to be looking at in today's lesson, and we're going to try and compare the threat from abroad compared with the threats at home. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you've got your list of threats Elizabeth faced at home. Money and finance and issues to do with gender and legitimacy and marriage. For me, if I was ranking it in order, I would put religion as the most important reason. I would put that right at the top. And the reason for that is the way in which it combines with threats from abroad, which is the focus of today's lesson. You can see from this map, you can see where England is, and you see that what's highlighted here is the Holy Roman Empire and Spain, and France is there, and the Spanish Netherlands, and all of these places that are highlighted are Catholic countries. Now, there was some pockets of Protestantism in France, and definitely in the Spanish Netherlands and in the Holy Roman Empire, but these countries were predominantly Catholic, and the Habsburg dynasty that controlled Spain and the Holy Roman Empire and spots of Austria and Hungary and the Spanish Netherlands was a particularly powerful ruling dynasty that was determined to protect Catholicism. So the problem for Elizabeth is that lots of these countries, Spain and France, were potentially, traditionally, enemies of one another, and England in the past had been able to play them off against each other, to ally with Spain against the French, and to ally with the French against the Spanish. The problem with England as a Protestant country, and Elizabeth setting out this course with the religious settlement that we looked at in lesson 5, the last lesson, is that England is out on a limb amongst the rest of Europe, certainly the big powers in the rest of Europe, and it means that these powers have something that unite them. Even though there are traditional rivalries between these powers, between the Habsburg Empire and the French, these traditional rivalries can be put to one side because they can unite in their Catholicism, they can unite in their desire to protect the Catholic faith against the common enemy, which is Protestantism, and public enemy number one in that case in Europe was Elizabeth I and England as the most powerful Protestant country. So what we're going to do today is have a look at these threats from abroad. In a moment you're going to pause this and you're going to read the information about the threats from France and the threats from Spain, and you're going to jot down, there's a space on your lesson notes booklet to do that, what the key threats or the key problems that Elizabeth faced with France and the key problems and threats Elizabeth faced in relation to Spain were. So pause this, have a go at that, and we'll come back in a moment. Okay. So from that reading, what you should have started to understand was the problems that Elizabeth had in relation to France and Spain. Now, the problem with France, that was England's traditional enemy, is that Elizabeth made a bit of a mistake at the beginning. She tried to help French Protestants, and that had blown up in her face when the Protestants concluded a peace with the Catholics, And it meant that she'd made a bit of an enemy in France because she'd been meddling in France's internal affairs, and that posed a bit of a problem for her because the French were not very happy. Now, traditionally, she would have turned to the Spanish to help her, the Spanish to balance out the fact that the French weren't happy with her. But of course, there are problems with the Spanish. You should have noted how devout a Catholic Philip of Spain was, how determined he was to protect the Catholic faith. But also this problem to do with the Spanish Netherlands. If you look on the map and you think how close the Spanish Netherlands are geographically to England, and in the Spanish Netherlands there are some Dutch people who are very strong Protestants, who have a desire to not only live their lives as Protestants, but also to overthrow Spanish rule in the Netherlands. So you've got Spanish rule over a people who feel as though they should be independent from that Spanish rule. So you've got a political nationalistic motivation for their actions. But you've also therefore got linked to that a religious element to this, because they are Catholic, I'll say they are Protestant, and they're trying to overthrow the Catholic power that is Spain and Philip. And Elizabeth's got a bit of a problem because right on her doorstep she wants to help these Dutch rebels. She wants to show that she supports their Protestantism, but if she does that, then she is effectively poking Philip of Spain with a big stick and annoying him, and he is a powerful Catholic ruler. So Spain and France pose different problems. She can't really play them off against each other very effectively because they are both strong Catholic powers against England as the only real Protestant power in Europe at the time. Okay, the last bit of your lesson booklet for today, and this is quite a short lesson today. It's just to set up some of the problems for Elizabeth that we're going to discover in coming lessons. The last bit of the lesson booklet asks you to think about what's the biggest threat. Does it come from home or does it come from abroad? Well, actually that's a bit of a simplistic question that requires a more complicated answer, because in reality the biggest threat to Elizabeth was a combination of threats from home and abroad. And so I said earlier that religion, for me, was the biggest threat to Elizabeth. It had the biggest potential to cause her problems. And as we're going to see in a few lessons' time, religion was certainly a key part of the Northern Rebellion, which was the biggest threat to Elizabeth that she faced in the first 11-12 years of her reign. But that threat of Catholic powers conspiring against her is obviously linked to the threat of Catholic powers abroad. And so that religious threat is also linked to the threat from Spain. And it's the Spanish Catholic threat, the potential that Catholic powers in England, Catholic people who were determined to overthrow Elizabeth, could work with the Spanish to achieve that aim. And for me, that is the biggest threat, where those Catholics in England had the potential to work with Catholics abroad to try and overthrow Elizabeth and to try and restore Catholicism in England and get rid of Protestantism and tear down the religious settlement and return England to the Catholic country that it was under Mary I. And there's one person, really, that provides the connection between these domestic threats and these foreign threats. And there's one person that's at the centre of all of the threats to Elizabeth that start to build up as the 1560s come to an end and Elizabeth moves into the 1570s and 1580s. And that one person is her cousin, Mary Queen of Scots. And Mary Queen of Scots is about to become, in our lessons, the epicenter of all the threats to Elizabeth. She is Elizabeth's cousin, as I said. She has a claim to the throne that she believes is as strong as Elizabeth's claim to the throne. She is a Catholic queen with connections in France and other parts of Europe, and she provides a huge threat to Elizabeth and all the forces that would conspire against Elizabeth and want to remove her from power see Mary, Queen of Scots, as an alternative ruler with a legitimate claim to the throne that they can flock to try and remove Elizabeth from the throne. So, that's the end of Lesson 6. It sets up nicely Lesson 7, which focuses on Mary, Queen of Scots, and the threat that she posed. Until next time, goodbye.